Hello. So it's my emotional response to Her 2014. Alright. Saw that recently. Two scenes particularly hit me. The first one being when they're writing letters at the beginning. I felt like that was kind of like the feeling of being just there for anybody else. And it felt like when I hear people like say they do so much for somebody else that they know, whether it could be maybe somebody in their past but still presently there, obviously, but somebody in the past that was closer, but now they're able to help more in another way. Or I kind of felt like the letter writing was associating to more of a limited space of who's able to have an emotional intelligence. Rather than letting everybody have emotional intelligence, the movie's subverting that and trying to say technology's taking over for it, but it's not really. It's actually a more limited scope of humans that are doing it. There's just machines somehow involved with it, but the story's showing right at the beginning that these are the few people that are using their emotional intelligence to understand it, to understand what's happening there, and to give light to what other people can't construct for themselves, whether it's for their relationship that they may have for 50 years, or a family member, a brother, a sister. And I think Her really emphasizes that this is about people's inability to really dig into what they are. And instead of doing that, opening and closing, there's kind of a spiritual bypassing in it. I was just looking into that recently. And it's like saying, well, there's this one part of my life that I'm not going to work on, that I don't want to recognize, but I'll recognize the rest of it. But this is one part I won't be working on. So I don't know if that's a complete definition of it, but I am given an idea of like what's not being identified of the relationship and what's not being worked on by itself. And then the other quote, which is about sometimes I think I have felt everything I'm ever gonna feel. And from here on out, I'm not gonna feel anything new, just lesser versions of what I've already left. You know, that hits home. I watched an interview recently too of think of George Lucas, and he was saying how there's a difference between joy and pleasure. Pleasure may not last, but you'll have it in that moment, and it'll be the highest of highest, but you'll never be able to repeat that. With joy, you can actually take in what you experience, maybe not at the highest level of joy, but you'll be able to keep it steadily there, and it's something you'll always come back to and still have that steady love for it that you always do. So you may not be able to feel those pleasures that you do in those highest moments, but you're still going to have a feeling for it that is going to be complex and vivid. It's just not going to reach the level of what could be there with pleasure, for example. But this quote, in Her, he's basically reaching for that pleasure and wants that pleasure, constantly. But he recognizes that he can't have that constantly too. And he's having lesser versions of that. The only thing I don't hear from that quote is what he's actually taking away from that. He understands it that way, And I think the movie really encapsulates him going through those emotions each time he's writing a letter, each time he's doing something emotionally for others, and the frustration he carries when he's just drunk and just wanting to fuck a girl or get fucked by a girl. And I think that's an important thing that he's carrying around with him constantly, because he said it so easily. So he's been feeling that for a very long time, that he could say it so clearly and concise and be able to display it in that scene in particular, where he's like totally, drunk and everything else. He's able to articulate exactly what he wants to say, which brings up another point of when someone's drunk and speaking that honestly. I identify that as, oh shit, this person's being very upfront and forward about what they feel. I'll take it seriously. I'll take it seriously that this person is feeling this way, and I'm not going to put it to the side. I'm going to literally speak it for what they're speaking it as. If you could easily define yourself in that space when you're drunk, that's basically saying, this is something I've been holding on to ever since I've recognized it, ever since I've been alive. So I think it's interesting that people, like he would say, that he's already recognizing the lesser feelings he's carrying now or getting now. And maybe that's why he's not able to create a fully developed feeling with what he's doing. He doesn't know exactly what he wants, because in a way he wants to justify it only by the biggest pleasure he can get. And I think that already is his ultimate failure, in that he's not taking in all the things he's doing. And I think that's why the function of the first part of the story, where he's writing the letters, is taking away from him too. It's taking away from his emotional intelligence working for himself, not for other people. Which is why I really felt that about the movie, that it was basically saying, leave all the work to them to be emotional. But the problem with that is, what about their lives? I was just talking about that with a friend of mine too, Sebastian, that to have ourselves only be nice, and only to compromise, and only to connect with other people's lives based on how much we don't speak up when we do need boundaries to something, when we do need to step away from it. All those emotions that he wants to feel in her, or he wants to be involved with, he can't, because he's spending so much time helping these other ones, or he's spending so much time thinking about the biggest pleasure he had. So this really affected me. I was crying during this one too. I think that's an important part of my emotional responses, that I want to be able to connect with the movie in a different way than what most people do. Or maybe they do and they're not able to say it. Maybe they're being like her. But thank you for listening.